Brett Bielema has the train rolling for Illinois football, but how sustainable is it? Locked On Illini, let's go.
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Illini, your first listen every single day. Just a reminder, we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Sunny Verma. You can find me at IlliniCast. You can find me at the Sunny V. Also, find us on Facebook or Instagram, Locked On Illini. If you'd like to support the show, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I'm on here giving you content daily, every single day. I'm trying to make a video or an audio podcast for you guys just to keep you filled in on the world of Illini athletics. Today is Tuesday. That means I'm going to have Big Ten Ted come join us as he recaps what went on in the Big Ten in Week 3, and we take a look at some of the big matchups in the conference in Week 4. Also, I came across a stat of Brett Bielema's, which on one hand is fantastic, on the other hand, a little bit concerning. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. First and foremost, I want to reference a tweet that came across my timeline earlier today, which had me both excited and a little bit concerned. And I'd love your feedback and let me know what you think of the job that Brett Bielema is overall doing. Now, the tweet was by Jonathan Kuhn. You can find him at Jonathan, Koon 1 on Twitter. He's helped me in the past with graphics, just one of the most loyal Illini fans I know. I'll be doing a future episode with just how many miles he has traveled to watch Illini games. And so definitely find him on Twitter if you're interested in Illini content. And his tweet earlier today was, what makes Illinois' number 24 ranking even more impressive is when you consider the talent on the roster in relation to other teams. 24/7 Sports has a talent composite that takes a look at the star makeup of each roster. Illinois is only 63 in the nation and dead last in the Big Ten at 18 in terms of talent, with 0 5-stars and only 8 4-star players on the roster. What does that tell you? That means that the coaching staff, that means Brett Bielema has come to Champaign and do what Brett Bielema was hired to come to Champaign and do, and that's coach up players. The Illinois brand isn't exactly strong enough where we have star players, 4 or 5-star players clamoring to come to Champaign. We have a history of not being a very successful program. So the niche that Illinois can fill is becoming an early years Wisconsin, an early years Iowa, where basically we find a coach who is able to recognize talent, recognize attributes, and coach them up, where high 3-stars can turn into 4-star players once they're in college football. Low 3-star players can be solid depth, solid 3-4 players once they hit the campus. Right now, Brett Bielema has us at 3-0 with our first Big Ten game against Nebraska on Friday night, which the entire world is going to be watching. But there's still something lacking. As much as I want to be positive about how Brett is leading this charge and doing more with less than any other coach in the conference, should he have to? I mean, should Illinois be number 18 when it comes to the talent composite level? I don't think that should be the case. When you get a bunch of 3-star athletes and a couple sprinkled in 4-stars, what you're doing is leaving very little margin for error. Brett needs to be sure that he's spotting the right guys, that he's hired a staff to find players that other teams have not located yet. And he's got to have confidence in his coaching staff to be able to coach up those players. When you have a couple handful of 4-star players on your roster, sometimes talent alone can help you win games. At the 3-star level, that's when we start competing with teams in smaller conferences. Illinois is a Big Ten school. Illinois competes when it comes to NIL. Maybe not as much as we do on the basketball side, but we're still somewhere in the middle when it comes to the football side, which is quite impressive in itself, considering the history of college football that Illinois has shown over the last couple decades. Is there a reason a school like Purdue can have 20 four-star players on their team, Maryland with 16, and Illinois with just 8? I think Brett Bielema is doing a fantastic job, and all my everydayers here on the show know that I think he's the perfect coach for Illinois. But that doesn't mean that there's no room for improvement. I've talked about this before. I think we need more high ceiling guys here in order to break it to another level. Right now, our aspirations are to finish 500, just to get the 6 wins, make it to a bowl game. But I think with our location, with our amenities, with our NIL capabilities, Illinois is capable of more than that. But Brett needs to go to work. I don't know if it's staff changes or just trying to find more ace recruiters. But for one reason or another, the Illinois brand hasn't improved as much over the first 3 years of Brett's tenure that we would probably like. Now, granted, we are only a couple snaps, it feels like, away from 3 straight bowl appearances, and that could have had a significant impact on what the perception was. That heartbreaking loss last year in the last game to Northwestern, that one certainly hurt. That could have been our 6th win and had us going to a bowl game. But we're halfway to a bowl game this year, 3-0. A big showcase game Friday night against Nebraska. We had a lot of recruits in for Kansas. We had a couple potential flips from other prominent programs visiting against Central Michigan. Brett and the staff have gotten the job done when it comes to their performances on the field. Now it's time for them to improve a bit on their performance off the field. Hey, Illini fans, have you heard about ROY? It stands for Return on You, and it's a new platform that lets you, the fans, get involved in NIL like never before by making contributions directly to your favorite athletes. By supporting players directly, you can help shape rosters, retain talent, and keep your favorite athletes out of the transfer portal. As you all know, NIL has changed the game for athletes. ROY changes the NIL game for fans. Here's why ROY is different. You can directly support the players. ROY allows fans to directly back their favorite college athletes. With ROY, fans can play a key role in shaping the future of their favorite teams, while athletes maximize their name, image, and likeness potential. Engage with athletes on their NIL journey. By using ROY, fans not only support athletes financially, but also become a part of their name, image, likeness journey, helping them succeed both on and off the field. Download ROY for iOS or Android and enter referral code Locked On, and you'll be automatically entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000 cash. Visit joinroy.com for additional details. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. Get the ROY app for iOS or Android and start making an impact on your favorite team. Use referral code Locked On for an opportunity to win $5,000 cash. Visit joinroy.com for more details. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. Get off the sidelines and enter the NIL game with ROY. Support the players and change the game with ROY. All right, it's Tuesday, so we get to do the Big Ten recap of both Week 3 and Week 4 preview with my good friend Big Ten Ted. Ted, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. You know, it was a week where maybe we're smelling some upsets, but that was not in the air at all, right? So, you know, the something about this form of work, I'm sure you've come across it as well. You know, sometimes you make predictions, you look smart. Sometimes you make predictions and you look not so smart. So, you know, it's a little bit of a give and take, but on to the next week, right?
So before we get started talking about Week 3 and Illinois and Central Michigan, Ted, I actually wanted your opinions on that first segment. Now, you, of course, do a fantastic job covering the Big Ten Conference as a whole, but you've slowly started to leak out that you're also a Wisconsin Badger fan growing up in Wisconsin. And so I know you were very hyped up for that game, and you got to see Brett Bielema kind of up and close for a couple of his early coaching years. What are your thoughts on Brett and how he builds a team?
Oh, man, he is one of the best developers, not only in the Big Ten Conference, but in all of college football. And then I think his style, of course, fits so well into this conference, and the style and the type of player that he recruits and the type of player that he's able to develop. So it's not ultra surprising that maybe they are that low in the talent composite. But considering that, it is also not surprising that a couple of years ago, of course, they had an 8-win team and developed some NFL players on that team. And then this team now ranked in the top 25 when people thought they might win 2, 3, or 4 games this year. Like, none of that is surprising. Brett Bielema asked fans at the University of Minnesota, right? Brett Bielema will always come back to bite you. That's just the circle of life, so to speak, within the Big Ten. But I think it just speaks to what Brett can do, kind of forming a culture and forming a program where he doesn't need to recruit the best guys. And you hear this at some other programs as well. Rutgers is one that you hear this a lot of, maybe, hey, we don't, of course you would love the best guys, right? But we want our guys. And I think Brett Bielema has a mold of what he wants to be able to bring in. And you've seen him being able to do that. And look at Illinois this season, right? I talked about how maybe some prognosticators had them below bowl eligibility. And so far, they're off to a rocket start. Of course, that win over a ranked Kansas team at the time. And now they got a big matchup, which I'm sure we'll talk about here a little bit later. But all of a sudden, everybody's looking at this Illinois team and looking at them very favorably. Like we talked at the beginning of the season about defense. And I think we've seen this defense. I think it's a little bit further along, I think, than we expected. Maybe you, the optimist, maybe thought it would be at this point. But I think maybe from a 10,000-foot view, national people maybe who cover the conference like myself, from up above, I think they've certainly made progress on that side of the ball. And that's all about development, getting your guys that fit what Brett Bielema wants to do, what Aaron Henry wants to do, what Barry Lenny Jr. wants to do. It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. But on multiple fronts, being where the talent is. But then just imagine, I know you're probably thinking of this, just imagine what can happen if Brett Bielema can raise the recruiting profile. Just imagine what Illinois can do at that time. It's very, very optimistic, very exciting to see what could happen, knowing just what kind of a developer of talent he is.
It takes a lot longer to turn around a football program compared to basketball. But let's just start talking about the week 3. Illinois now 3-0, halfway to its goal of 6 wins and getting bowl eligibility. For those everydayers, they know Las Vegas had set the line at 5.5 wins. So winning that Kansas one was a key victory.
Yeah.
Victory over Central Michigan, 30-9. The defense played well. The offense had some issues. I'm curious. I know you watched a little bit of the game. What were your thoughts on the Illini? And really, what are your thoughts on the Illini now that we've finished 25% of the season?
Yeah, this is a team that I think, at least how I viewed them, and I had this team beginning of the season 6-6. I think higher prediction wise than maybe some other national prognosticators had them right now. But I think they're ahead of schedule. Right, we talked about it in that first segment that we were just talking about, and now here this season, I think Luke Altmaier is more confident than I thought he would be. I talked about the defense and how they're higher than I thought they would be. I thought there were parts of Central Michigan where maybe this could get a little bit tricky. Of course, coming off a big win against Kansas, right? When you have a big emotional win, considering the sellout and all that stuff that went in to last week's win for Illinois, and then you go over a team that was able to move the football. Now they were a little bit turnover prone. I think Labus had 5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions coming into that game. But credit to Aaron Henry, credit to this defense, credit to this team for being dialed in and not allowing that to happen. That is the mark of a great culture. That's the mark of a great coaching staff, to keep them focused after a big time win. Now, you kind of mentioned, the offense still, kind of has some things to perfect as we now get to the tough part of the schedule for Illinois. But man, and a lot of people are going to be talking about Pat Bryant. A lot of people are going to be talking about Altmaier and maybe the sexy parts of this offense, so to speak. But I think the defense has really been very impressive to me, just how far along they are. And then going back to Pat Bryant, beginning of the season, we were talking about Zachary Franklin. Man, he's the guy, he's the playmaker that this team needs. Pat Bryant has been on the field a lot during his Illinois career, very early during his Illinois career. And you saw him incrementally improve, but this year he has made a giant step forward. And now if you have Franklin on one side, you have Brian on the other side, that makes for a really good wide receiver tandem. And then we haven't even seen Caden Fagan really get off the ground. So I don't think this Illinois offense has reached its potential, and that could possibly be a scary thought for the rest of the Big Ten.
Yeah, I hope so. You had him pegged at 6. I had him pegged at 7. It's funny, it might just come down to that Michigan game, which I would laugh at, but we'll see what happens. Ted, you obviously watched a lot of Big Ten action in week 3. Before we start talking about the Illinois-Nebraska game, which I know everybody's tuning in for, what are the big storylines from the last weekend of football in the Big Ten Conference?
Well, you had some dominant performances and you had some embarrassing performances. I'm a positive guy. Let's start on the positive note. The Oregon Ducks and the Indiana Hoosiers, right? Oregon has had problems. They had an injury to Matthew Bedford at guard, and they had Dan Lanning was talking about it in some press conferences. Hey, we're shuffling around our offensive line. We're trying to figure out this combination, and they figured it out by moving Poncho back to center and just, Marcus Harper at right guard, and you got the tackles being the tackles over there. And this was an offensive line that finally looked like a unit and finally looked like a cohesive unit. This is the Oregon that we all expected at the beginning of the year. It just kind of took them a little bit, right, to get going. I've made this analogy before in maybe a different way, but it's that old lawnmower. It needs a couple of pulls to really get started, but when that engine is going, it's old, reliable, and this Oregon engine, I think it started. I think it started right now. And you saw when this offensive line is doing its thing, not only is the throw game with Dylan Gabriel working down the field, I love what they do in the run game. I love what they do with Jordan James, Noah Whittington, right? I love what they do establishing that. I think when people think of Oregon, they think of flashy uniforms and they think of flashy offense, but this can be a physical football team. They were that last year in their final season in the Pac-12 with Bucky Irving, the former Minnesota Golden Gopher. And I love it when Oregon plays that style, when they can punch you in the mouth and run the football, and then they go over the top. And I also love Dylan Gabriel's mobility. I think look, Bo Nix was certainly not a statue back there last season, but Dylan Gabriel, you saw it. He takes it, 50, 60 yards, something like that on a speed option. He's got that scootability where you can do some design run stuff with him. Indiana, oh, man, I love Kurt Cignetti. Man, he is, I believed in him at the start of the season. 6-6, that's kind of where I had him, just like these Illinois Fighting Illini, but 8-4 and 9-3. Just look at the remainder of the schedule.
Exactly.
8-4 and 9-3 is not out of the question. All right, you got games against Ohio State. You got a game against Nebraska. You got a game against Michigan. 2 out of those 3 are in Bloomington, and it's not Ohio State. So maybe the 2 more favorable matchups are in Bloomington, Indiana. Like if they can beat Maryland, they got Charlotte and Northwestern, could set up a 6-0, 6-0. We'll see. Your Illini might have something to say about that against the Nebraska Cornhuskers here coming up. But Curtis Rourke is just playing with so much confidence. He's so confident in the system. He's so confident in his abilities. He's so confident in his weapons. He's very smart. He's very cerebral. He's very calm, cool, and collected. It looks like he's been playing in this offense for 3 years. It really does. And the scary part about Indiana is they're just getting Donovan McCulley healthy again. The leading receiver from last year. He was back against UCLA. He got targeted a couple of times, but didn't really get into the action. If he's now able to join the Elijah Surratts of the world, the Miles Cross of the world, the Keyshawn Williams of the world, and all of these guys that Indiana can spread across the formation, they are dangerous. And the thing about Indiana that I love, every time you look, for those of you watching on video, right, every time you look to the sideline, he's just got that grin on his face, that never satisfied attitude. He's always picking something apart in a halftime interview or a post-game interview. You can tell he's coached under Nick Saban. All right. You can tell he's got that rat poison mentality where he's always looking for something, no matter how impressive his football team looks right now. So I love Indiana, and their defense and their line play, I think, is a little bit underrated as well. You look at the embarrassments. Let's start with Purdue, man. You had one job.
That was
contain
bad.
the run game, and they failed miserably at that
bad.
job. Oh my gosh. Like we talked about offensive line last year, protecting Hudson Card. And then you look at the defensive line, their trench play is not good. to say the least. Now, we didn't really have a whole lot of data points. We had a spring game and a game against Indiana State to go off of. So this was a big kind of measuring stick barometer to see where they were going to be. Their offensive line, once again, does not look very good. Okay. Their defensive line does not look very good. They have a hard time tackling in space. It could be a long season if this continues, but I want to say this. I think this was a very motivated Notre Dame team. Coming off of last week, everybody telling them, see ya, you're out of the college football playoff. They said, we got to make a statement. And Purdue might have just been on the wrong place on the wrong weekend on the schedule. I think it might come down to that, but that's a heck of a run game that Notre Dame has. When it is clicking, it is really clicking. So they've got a lot of work to do. And then you look at the Wisconsin Badgers, of course, when Tyler Van Dyke goes out the first drive of the game, and then we just learned he's out for the season, right? That is, you're not going to beat Alabama, one, or be competitive against Alabama, one, when your starting quarterback goes out, and two, when you fumble the football, when you jump off sides on a third down to give Alabama another opportunity to get in the end zone, when you miss field goals, when you can't, there is so much. It's just, when I look at Wisconsin, I know it's hard to judge against Alabama, but this just looks almost like an underdeveloped football team right now, which I did not anticipate at this point in the Luke Fickell tenure, because everybody can talk about, well, you can't judge. Alabama's Alabama. They look like a machine this year. And that is true. But look at how Wisconsin played against Western Michigan. Look at how they played against South Dakota. Their lines got pushed around at times, maybe not the entire 60 minutes of the game, but the Broncos and the Coyotes were able to push them around at times. And those were 4-quarter games. And those, and you look at the Western Michigans and South Dakotas of the world, when Barry Alvarez is coach, when your guy Brett Bielema, right, is the coach, even when Paul Chryst, right, and I know it didn't end up well for him, but rarely did Wisconsin get pushed around that much against those type of teams, and then especially against Alabama. Now, the bye week couldn't come at a better time for the Badgers. They've kind of got this weird thing where they've got to get right in this bye week, and then they got to go on the road to USC. Good luck with that. But after that, they've got a favorable stretch. So Wisconsin just has to reset, figure things out. They've got some major looking in the mirror to do after this type of performance. They've certainly got to clean things up. So you had some great performances. You had some performances towards the bottom, but teams taking care of business, I think, for the most part. Big Ten still looks pretty deep.
Two teams that have taken care of business, Illinois, Nebraska, going to be the primetime showdown Friday night. Right after the break, we're going to talk about it. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Ted. Friday night, prime time. Illinois versus Nebraska. Two top 25 teams in one of the first real big matchups in the conference this year. What are your thoughts on this matchup on Friday?
Boy, this could be, I know we talked about Illinois and maybe that they need to run the football better. Their offensive line needs to get better in the interior. But I think this is, Matt Rule and Brett Bielema, this could end up being some Big Ten football. This could end up being some really good football on the interior. But this could also be some football where they could pitch it around a little bit and you could see some explosive plays. I think the defenses, of course, are going to really be on display. I think the offenses both are pretty good. Two young quarterbacks, Dylan Gabriel on one side, Luke Altmaier, of course, not as young, but still, of course, last year, maybe partial starter. This year, hopefully it's his first complete year as a starting quarterback at Illinois. But Brett Bielema said it in his press availability. I think it's going to come down to running the football better, which defense steps up and make plays. I know Illinois has been a very improved defense, and we've talked about that, but the black shirts just look on another level right now, personally. And they're going to have that night environment. We saw how big of an advantage that can be. against Colorado. When I look at this thing for Illinois, I think they got to get a lot of momentum early, because if this crowd gets in this one at Memorial Stadium and Illinois goes 3-and-out, Nebraska goes down the field, and they're able to move it, okay, you don't want to get behind against this defense that now, if they're in a position where they're leading in a football game, Tony White can afford to maybe put a little bit more pressure, more guys in the box, that kind of thing. So can Illinois make plays over the top? Tommy Hill and company, right? They've been pretty darn good in pass coverage so far this season. So Illinois, Barry Lunney Jr., they got to try to put together an offensive game plan to try to keep Nebraska on their heels. I think that's going to be a pretty sizable challenge for the Illini in this game. On defense, you got to find a way to rattle Dylan Raiola. Now, he threw his first interception of the season last week against Northern Iowa, so he hasn't really been rattled. Credit up front on the offensive line. They will be minus Micah Mazuka up front at the guard position in this game. So maybe they can have some interior pressures to try to get Dylan, maybe rolling out a little bit. But I think that's a big key for Illinois. You need to try to get Dylan uncomfortable. He's been fairly comfortable in the pocket. And as a true freshman, no matter how talented he is, when he sees pressure after pressure after pressure for the first time, I'm just very curious to see how he's going to react in that particular situation. But I think it's going to come down to a typical Big Ten formula, right? Who's going to be able to run the football better? Who's going to be better up front? And then who's going to play better on the defensive side of the football? But man, this is going to be a fantastic Friday night showdown. I'm looking forward to it. This one's got a lot of juice behind it. You kind of look at the schedule that's coming up next for Illinois, and man, if they can find a way to win this one and continue to carry some momentum, like that would be huge, I think, for this Illinois program right now. So yeah, they've got to find a way to be better running the football than they've been. Okay, if Caden Fagan can get things going up the middle, that could maybe soften up the rest of the defense as well. And then once again, if you can rattle Dylan Raiola, and maybe force some turnovers, give your offense a short field, right, that could certainly be a big factor in if Illinois can pull this upset.
Yeah, I think Illinois may be 3-0. And really, if you take a look at it, the score differential is very much in the favor of Illinois, but they're going to have to play an A- at minimum game to come out victorious against Nebraska in Lincoln. Their offensive line issues, they're just going to have to figure out, because if they don't, Nebraska is going to be harassing Luke Altmaier all night long. Now, Luke has been playing relatively mistake-free football this season, and I'm really proud of his elevation. I know, Ted, you and I have talked about it. Like, I've always been a big Luke Altmaier supporter. And to me, this year, like, he's not forcing the throws that he forced last year. He's willing to take the sack to eat or to live another day. So, he still has the capability, because of the weapons that he has, to make the proper throw, the throw needed to, get 6 on the throwing side. But if the folks aren't keeping him honest, if all of a sudden we have no running game, and as you said, Tony White's able to zero in on Luke and make his life a living hell, then I just don't know what more. I don't know if Luke is the talent level that where he can just win a game by himself. But there's other good matchups also in week 4, including one Michigan and USC, which I'm very intrigued with. What are your thoughts on that game?
Boy, for how I thought about this in the beginning of the season, my thoughts have completely flipped. Like, you look at what Michigan and their identity is, and now they got back a little bit, right? They were able to run the football fairly effectively against Arkansas State, but you watch the film a little bit closer on this Michigan Wolverines team, and they have some things in common on the offensive line in all 3 games. I'm not saying it's been the entire game, but this offensive line has gotten blown off the ball by Fresno State, by Texas, probably the best team in the country, and Arkansas State. Now, the first one and the third one, those are certainly the most concerning. Now, early in that game against Ark State, I saw the Red Wolves be able to push back Michigan. Now, of course, they got it going a little bit later on during that game. Kaleo Mullins was able to get some explosive runs. But when I look at USC and how improved they are, and what defensive line coach Eric Henderson has done with this defensive line, this is all of a sudden a Michigan team. They're 6.5-point home dogs right now. That's the opening line. And if Michigan can't run the football, they've got some quarterback problems. Davis Warren threw 3 bad interceptions against Arkansas State. Alex Orji is now going to get the nod. It was announced by Sharon Moore that that's going to happen. And right now, I think Michigan is just trying to get as many weapons in the run game in the backfield as humanly possible to try to overwhelm these teams. And I think the mobility of Alex Orji can maybe neutralize some things on the offensive line where maybe now they're reading guys more instead of blocking guys like they used to. So some RPO stuff, some read stuff, and just try to get Khalil Mullins, Donovan Edwards, and Alex Orji all in the backfield at the same time. And then it's pick your poison. Like if USC is able to do what they did against LSU being one of the best offensive lines in the country, a much better offensive line than Michigan, you look to the other side of the ball. Will Johnson, of course, is one of the best corners in the country, but there's been teams that, you look at the rest of the secondary, and I think it is susceptible, especially against the pass game like the USC Trojans, okay? Going into the big house is, of course, never easy, but man, this is the type of win that could be a statement type of victory for USC. Not just winning the game. I think there is a potential that the Trojans win handily, because if Michigan can't move the football, this defense, like you kind of go into the classic old Iowa format when they've played a good team, right? Their defense can only hold up for so long, and then eventually the dam breaks because they're out there, their hands on hips, they're tired, and they can just only hold up so long when the offense is just not able to move the football. I think USC could win this one and win this one pretty handily. So outside of that one, you've got Iowa and Minnesota for the Floyd of Rosedale as well. Boy, that should be fun. I saw at PJ Fleck's press conference, they're talking about, hey, we know, our guys know what a valid fair catch signal is. So I thought that was very interesting in the press availability earlier in the week. There's going to be a lot of steam behind this one. Of course, Iowa kind of felt that they got screwed last year. Minnesota trying to prove that last year wasn't a fluke, okay? And of course, it's Iowa, Minnesota. It's one of the best trophies in sports. There's a reason why Minnesota fans chant, "We hate Iowa," when leaving the stadium after every single game. That's the juice that this kind of rivalry has. It's the earliest that this game has ever been played. Now, when you start to break this one down, boy, you have 2 pretty good run games. Caleb Johnson leads the Big Ten in rushing right now. I said it about a week ago. This offense seems like it's Caleb Johnson or bust. Okay. And for most of the season, it's been Caleb Johnson, not a lot of bust, right? He's been able to get some explosive downhill run game. It's a thing of beauty when this offensive line is also doing their thing, and number 2 in black and gold is busting off those big runs. But if I'm Minnesota, if I'm PJ Fleck, if I'm Corey Heatherman, the defensive coordinator, I'm bringing everybody up into the box. I am. I think Minnesota has some defensive backs that can make plays. The Golden Gophers right now lead the Big Ten in interceptions. Freshman Kerry Brown had 2 last week. We'll see what happens with the health of Justin Wally. But I think if I'm the Gophers, I want to load the box. I need to contain or stop Caleb Brown. Or not Caleb Brown. I mean, Caleb Johnson. Caleb Brown is that receiver. I need to stop Caleb Johnson and make Cade McNamara beat me. On the other side of the coin for Minnesota, Max Brosmer has been throwing the ball better. Darius Taylor had a big touchdown run against Nevada last week, but I think we're still looking, of course he was injured week 1 against North Carolina, but I think we're still looking for that really breakout wow type of performance. Watch out for this. Iowa right now has given up 3 long touchdowns of 60 yards or more. And it was that Jalen Noel touchdown that maybe cost them that game. This is an Iowa defense, so far at least, that has been susceptible to big passing plays down the field. Max Brosmer, Daniel Jackson, Elijah Spencer. This pass game has improved a lot since that loss against North Carolina, wins over Rhode Island, and wins over Nevada. I'm really watching to see if this Minnesota offense can create big plays down the field. If they can, like Troy was able to do, like Iowa State was able to do, then I think Minnesota can do a lot of different things on the offensive side of the football. I would be very surprised if the difference in this game is more than 7 points. I think that this is going to be a very close game. After that game for Minnesota, on that, 2 missed field goals cost them that game. And I think there was a lot of there was a lot of droopy faces for the maroon and gold after that one, but I think it's kind of rising back up. And now all of a sudden, if Minnesota is able to get this win over Iowa, they're 3-1, and they're feeling pretty good about themselves as well. So this is going to be a very, very fun matchup. Look, it's probably not going to score a lot of points. I'm so happy that it's under the lights, Big Ten Saturday night on NBC. It's going to be an electric atmosphere down there in Minneapolis, and I can't wait to see it.
Best in the world, Ted. Let the folks know once again where they can find you and what you're up to on your channel.
At Big Ten Ted over there on X, YouTube, Big Ten Ted over there. Going to be previewing these 3 games that we talked about. Going to have my picks at the end of the week as well. So it's going to be a very, very fun week and another very exciting week, certainly, of Big Ten college football.
All right, Ted. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. Thank you.
And that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Locked On Illini. Thank you. Just a friendly reminder, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Helps us out immensely. Nebraska week continues. I'm going to have Justin Adams from the Nebraska Voice of College Football channel on in the next couple of days. We're going to get a little viewpoint from the Nebraska side. We'll see how confident he is on Nebraska's 8.5 to 10-point favorite in Vegas. Let me know what your thoughts on this show, on what kind of shows you want to watch moving forward. Find me on Instagram, on Facebook, Locked On Illini. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow. ILL. Love you guys.